Hey, I'm Jimmy Seitz. Welcome to our series, The 23rd Psalm in Troubled Times. In Lesson 1, we talked about the important role of the Good Shepherd. And in Lesson 2, we talked about the fact that we have all we need for true contentment. Lesson 3, we looked at the need for quiet rest provided by the Good Shepherd. And in Lesson 4, we talked about the living water that the Good Shepherd provides through the principle of Sabbath keeping. And this brings us to today's verse, Psalm 23, the first part of verse 3. He restores my soul. Right now, you may feel a great need for restoration. And I'm not talking about the broken concrete in your driveway or those cracked tiles in your kitchen or your bathroom. I'm not even talking about your physical restoration after you've eaten way too much comfort food while you've been confined in your home. Let's just be honest though, there's real possibility that you may need some spiritual restoration. You know, when things get rough, like they have with this coronavirus pandemic and the associated financial crisis, it affects your spirit. If you feel this effect, I'm going to be honest with you, you're not alone. I'm right there with you. I've lost a lot through all of this chaos. I didn't see it coming. I've lost more than some people and a lot less than many others. But no matter what the amount is, the significance of it to me and to my family and my ministry is something that gets my attention. And as a result, it's easy for me to get depressed. Now, I'm not talking about clinical depression. I'm talking about the will of the heart to keep moving forward, to stay positive like I normally am, to be upbeat, ready to go. It's easy to digress into sullen moods or to feel anxiety or to even worry about things that haven't happened yet or may never even happen, or to get more angry or even less tolerant of other people, especially those I love. And if I'm not careful, I'll find myself even doing silly things like binge watching meaningless TV shows rather than using my time more wisely to accomplish at least something worthwhile. Sometimes I might even start missing my Bible study time, and I just get lethargic. You ever felt that way? I mean, all of these are signs that I need spiritual restoration. These are signs that I am a sheep that has gone astray from the flock and nighttime is coming. It's actually a very dangerous situation. Is that where you are right now? I want to go back to a book that I introduced you to in Lesson 3. Philip Keller's classic, A Shepherd Looks at the 23rd Psalm. Keller, who was a shepherd for many years, explains an old English term that shepherds of long ago used about a sheep that would get lost and stuck. They called it being cast. A sheep that becomes large and heavy is a prime candidate for being cast. This may happen due to pregnancy, growing too much wool, or overeating and becoming fat. A heavy sheep will often look for what's known as a soft spot to lay down. This may be in a grassy, low spot in the pasture that's damp and cool. It might be in the nearby woods where there's shade. The sheep lies on its side and it shifts a bit too far, thus throwing it off of its center of gravity and rolling onto its back. And once in that position, the sheep does not have the ability to upright itself if it's too overweight. So it's going to sit there and flail its legs and even wallow a bit, thus matting its wool into the ground below it. It may bleat, but not very loudly, though it's very frustrated by this situation. Gases begin to swell inside the sheep, and the flow of blood is cut down on its legs and its extremities. Now, on a hot day, the sheep doesn't have long to live in this situation. During a rainy or cold period, the sheep can survive for several days while cast. One thing is certain, the sheep cannot rescue itself. Now imagine how the shepherd feels when he calls the flock in during the early evening and he realizes that one of his sheep is missing. I mean, after all, the shepherd is very familiar with all of his sheep. He gives them all names, he memorizes their characteristics, he knows their behaviors. And the first thought that comes to his mind is that old Fluffy has become cast somewhere. And so he's urgently corralling the flock inside the sheep pen where they're going to spend the night. He grabs his flashlight and immediately begins the search for the lost sheep. The shepherd is not the only one that might be looking for this cast sheep. Mountain lions, coyotes, wolves, they know far too well that a cast sheep is easy prey. So the shepherd hurries his steps, just thinking about it. He loves this sheep dearly, and he wants to find it before death takes it. After what might be hours of searching, even into the dark night, the shepherd hears a faint bleat. and his feet begin to run to the sound as fast as he can go. And the flashlight beam suddenly illuminates what he's been looking for. There's old Fluffy, flat on her back, flailing weakly to right herself from the cast position. Now the shepherd at this point must take great care. He wants to calm the sheep as well as get it back on its feet, but that's not easily done. The sheep's very heavy, and the shepherd must first get it turned. He will often literally straddle the sheep and lift it like a power lifter, trying to get it upright. And at first, the legs of the sheep are numb and they don't work, so the shepherd gently rubs the legs until the blood flow returns and feeling is restored. Even then, the sheep may not be able to walk, and the shepherd will have to continue to hold the sheep upright. There are many occasions that the heavy wool of the sheep is so matted with mud and debris that the sheep cannot even carry its own weight in this condition. So the shepherd literally picks up the sheep in his arms and carries the sheep back to the pen. All the while, the shepherd is gently and calmingly speaking to the sheep. He's saying beautiful, positive phrases, maybe tinged with a little bit of loving scolding. When the shepherd gets the sheep back safely to the flock, he's already thinking ahead. He's being preventive. He may choose to get out those sheep shears and shear the wool off of old Fluffy, though she doesn't really like being sheared very much. It's extra work that night on the shepherd, but you know what? It may keep old Fluffy from becoming cast again in just a few days. He may lose a little bit of income from the loss of the dirty wool, but he may gain much more income because he's keeping old Fluffy alive and she's going to bear some lambs in the future. Besides, prevention is always better than conflict management. Now I want you to keep this image of the cast sheep and the shepherd in mind as we're going to take a look at one of the parables that Jesus taught. It's found in Luke 15, 1 through 7, and here's how it begins. All the tax collectors and sinners were approaching to listen to him. Now stop for a second. Tax collectors were Jewish citizens who were hired by the Roman government to collect taxes from the Jews for Caesar. You can understand why the Jewish citizens literally hated tax collectors. They looked upon them as traitors. Only vile sinners would associate with tax collectors. I mean, these were the black sheep of the flock of Israel. Thus, Luke's opening statement to set the context of Jesus' parable, that got the attention, didn't it? Then Luke works in the juxtaposition into the story. He weaves in completely contrasting characters, the Pharisees and the scribes. These were the strictest of the religious people in Israel. They were the leading, most healthy, vibrant sheep in the flock. They were the most worthwhile, valuable to the shepherd. Therefore, in their minds, they have every right to judge and condemn the vile sinners among the black sheep of the flock. That's exactly what they do at the beginning of Jesus' parable. The Pharisees and scribes were complaining, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. What man among you who has 100 sheep and loses one of them does not leave the 99 in the open field and go after the lost one until he finds it? When he's found it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders, and coming home, he calls his friends and neighbors together, saying to them, "Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep." I tell you, in the same way, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who don't need repentance. I believe that Jesus was talking about finding a cast sheep. Jesus does not stand in judgment if a sheep has been terribly bad and wanders away from the flock and gets itself cast, like the prodigal son did. Nor does he stand in judgment if the sheep has been wonderfully good, staying with the flock, yielding lots of healthy lambs year after year, yielding a bumper crop of wool from its hide, yet it finds itself cast due to simply lying down in a soft spot for a nap. The point of Jesus' parable is that he has a heart for cast sheep, those that are lost from the flock. He knows far too well that the most deadly predator of all, Satan, is roaming about like a roaring lion looking for a cast sheep to devour. And Jesus, the Good Shepherd, knows his sheep by name, he loves them deeply, and he feels all the shepherd's emotions of concern and fear and anxiety and urgency to find that lost sheep. He feels the immense sadness and the pain. if the sheep dies. He feels the overwhelming joy and relief when he finds the sheep alive and he's able to rescue it. Are you the sheep in the story that's become cast? Hey, you could be. Maybe you're the black sheep of the flock, the one that gets judged and condemned by the religious people in society because of the way you live your life. Do you spend a lot of time in the bars? Are you searching for contentment in the bottle? Are you finding your pleasure in bedrooms other than your own? Would your language cause your grandmother to turn over in her grave? Do you feel like the roof might cave in if you actually walked into a church building? Do you experience the sting of guilt occasionally when you think of the way you were raised in contrast to the way you're currently living? If so, you're a cast sheep. Now, you could be the most woolly, healthy, vibrant sheep of the entire flock, and you bless your shepherd often with beautiful twin lambs. You may be the flock leader, correcting the troublemakers and setting a positive example for them to follow. And in a single moment where you let your guard down, with no intention whatsoever of getting into any kind of predicament, you just lay down in a soft spot, and you end up stuck and helpless. Or maybe a storm came and just knocked you over right out of nowhere. It literally blew you over like a tornado, or like the coronavirus pandemic, or the financial recession. And guess what? You too are a cast sheep. You might be a sheep somewhere in between these two extremes at any variant level, and you too have become cast. Let me share something with you. The Bible is clear that it can happen to people from all walks of life, the rich and the poor, the healthy and the sick, the godly and the ungodly, the male and the female, the young and the old. We all get cast. The Bible also makes it clear that there is a good shepherd who knows your name, he loves you deeply, and he is searching for you to rescue you so he can carry you in his arms to safety. Now let me tell you of one such story and how Jesus restored the soul of a cast sheep that meant so much to him. A baby was born in the 1st century AD to a man named Jonah, who lived in a small town called Bethsaida. It's near the northern shore of Lake Tiberias, otherwise known as the Sea of Galilee. Bethsaida literally means house of hunting or house of fishing. And this little village was a magnet for people who loved the outdoors, for rough and tough hunters who knew how to live in the heavy thickets of the headwaters of the Jordan River that flowed through the little town of Bethsaida. People who made a living from fishing in the nearby lake raised their families in Bethsaida, including Jonah. Evidently, he was a God follower. His family must have encountered God along the way and grown into the Jewish faith, probably worshiping at a nearby synagogue. Because the first glimpse that we have of the family is that of two sons of Jonah, Peter and his younger brother Andrew. As young adults, they traveled almost 100 miles south down to the Dead Sea, according to John chapter 1, verses 19 through 51. And they were looking for the Messiah. It was there that the younger brother Andrew finds Jesus. And then he goes and gets his brother Peter and brings him to meet Jesus. They also had two other friends with them that had also grown up in Bethsaida. Their names were Philip and Nathanael. Now, I'm giving you this background information because I want you to understand that Jesus knew Peter and his brother before he called them from the fishing boat on the Sea of Galilee to follow him and become his apostles. My theory is that Jesus was about to go and start his 40 days of temptation in the Judean wilderness near the Dead Sea when he met these four young men. He eventually departed from them. So Peter, Andrew, Philip, and Nathanael headed back north, and they went home expecting to see him soon. They didn't see their new rabbi for 40 days. They probably thought something had happened to him. It might have even been longer than that. And they had no choice but just to go back to the familiar, back home, back to fishing. Oh, they'd been so excited at first. We have found the Messiah! But then after a very long lull with absolutely nothing happening, it changed, didn't it? We thought we had found the Messiah. It was about to happen, and then nothing. What's going on? I don't understand. Have you asked that question lately? And so they went back to the only thing they knew how to do well, fishing. And then weeks later, maybe months later, as Peter is cleaning the nets following a wasted night of fishing with nothing to show for it, he hears a voice coming from his own boat that's beached nearby. He looks around and discovers it's Jesus, wanting him to pull the boat out from the shore just a ways so he can teach the crowd that's gathering. Now imagine Peter's excitement that the Messiah is back, and he does what Jesus asked. Then afterwards, Jesus directs Peter to take the boat back out to the deep water and cast his nets for fish. Being a commercial fisherman, Peter knew that this is going to be useless. I mean, the time to fish is at night. That bright sunlight coming in filtering through the water there is going to scare the fish. They're going to see the nets. It's not the time to fish. But he makes the decision. I'm going to do what the Messiah says. Probably did it with a sigh, but he did it. And you probably know what happens next, don't you? The nets filled so full of fish that they began to break. And Peter's fishing partners in another boat, James and John, came to help. And a record catch filled all the boats, and shekels were flopping everywhere. But all Peter could do was fall at the knees of Jesus and say, "Go away from me, because I'm a sinful man, Lord." Jesus then called Peter to follow him and become one of his disciples. And he told him, "From now on, you'll be catching people." And Peter left the boat and the flopping shekels and everything else, and he followed Jesus. Jesus had found a cast sheep and rescued him. For the next 3 years, Peter walked with Jesus, and he saw amazing things. And he did some amazing things that he never dreamt he would be able to do. Did you know he caught a fish with a coin in its mouth so he could pay taxes? He healed people from sickness. He cast out demons. For crying out loud, he walked on water. If there was ever a person living on this earth who could claim that he's been radically transformed spiritually by God, it was Peter. Yet once again, he found himself in a cast position. And this time it was a very bad predicament. Do you remember the time when Jesus was trying to get him to stay awake in the garden and he couldn't stay awake? Jesus is within hours of his crucifixion. And when the mob came out and took him, Peter followed from afar and eventually denied Christ 3 times. Even Jesus told him he would, and he said, "Never." But he did. And it tore him up. It ripped his heart out of his chest. And with all the things that transpired around the crucifixion and resurrection and the appearances, Peter just couldn't forgive himself for those 3 denials. Do you know what he ended up doing? He ended up going back home. He went to the one thing that he was most familiar with in his previous life: fishing. At least he could do that. And this brings me back to the Good Shepherd who goes out looking for his cast sheep. Let's continue the story. The night was still, as if holding its breath. The moon spotlighted the calm surface of the lake, exploding in this brilliant shimmer of white light on blue-green water. And the fishing was slow. On such a night as this, the fisherman must be stealthy. He must know the 10% of the lake where 90% of the fish hang out. He must avoid the other 90% of the lake where the remaining 10% of the fish live. The right location improves his odds of putting a fish in the skillet, and such was the objective of the bearded outdoorsman who had an early morning lakeside breakfast on his mind. His friends were unaware of his presence, only 100 yards away in their boat. They were fishing the river channel where it ran into the lake, and he was fishing from the shore. These friends were some of the best fishermen in the country. They had figured out how to make a living catching fish. Many little boys in the region had grown up dreaming of the great catch, the legendary boat filler. Well, these men were no different, and the dream drove them to learn the trade, to hone not only hooks but also their skill, to seek the great catch that would land them on the cover of the regional news and turn them into living legends and pay for the boat upgrade. The professional anglers in the boat had experienced the boat filler only one time before, precisely 3.5 years earlier. Maybe they were even thinking of that incredible moment as they threw the nets out for another try, hoping to change their luck. And they tried all their hot spots. They pulled out every trick, but all to no avail. The fish simply just wouldn't cooperate. Now the fisherman with the huge calloused hands and the loudest mouth finally made the announcement. "All right, let's call it a night, boys." His voice couldn't conceal his disappointment. For the next 2 hours, they're reeling in and folding their nets, careful to clean the weeds from every strand of netting. Meanwhile, over on the shore, out of sight in the darkness, the lone outdoorsman was also reeling something in, several fish. He too had grown up within a few miles of the lake, and he had some secret fishing holes of his own. He quietly cleaned and prepared the fish for cooking. He started a fire, he finished his task, and he had brought additional breakfast foods that complement fish, and he retrieved these as the fish broiled over the hot coals. Then he turned his attention to the fishermen in the boats. "Hey, you guys doing any good out there?" he yelled. "No," came the reply, skimming across the surface like a rock. "We fished all night. We hadn't caught a single fish." They were probably thinking more like, well, the moon's wrong, the barometer must be falling, we're just not holding our mouths right. Then they heard the words that would make any professional angler laugh in such a moment, especially when the words were spoken by some spectator standing on the shore without a boat. "Hey, try casting on the other side of your boat and you'll catch some." For some reason, the men who made their living at fishing listened to the man who didn't. They may have been ushered back by the words to an earlier occasion when similar words were spoken, and they caught so many fish that their boats were about to sink. It's the day they experienced the boat filler. That was the day they became household names in all the fishing villages. That was the day so many fish flopped in the boats that every mortgage among them could have been paid off. Yet that was also the day that 4 fishermen walked away from their miraculous catch and their flopping fortunes. That was the day that Jesus had called them to leave everything behind, follow Him, and be fishers of men. He certainly knew how to pick up on a guy's interest. Oh, they had discussed that among themselves. But then after these 3.5 years, these mind-blowing years, he had gone and got himself killed down in Jerusalem, about 90 miles away. And they too had even experienced close calls. So disheartened by all that had happened, they had returned to what they knew best, fishing. Yet here again, you got this stranger telling you to try one more cast on the other side of the boat. I mean, what could they lose except time? And they certainly had plenty of that on their hands now. So out went the nets, in went the fish, tight went the ropes, open went the mouths. Gape-jawed, eyes wide, knuckles taut, biceps burning as the fishermen were struggling with 153 of the biggest fish that they've ever caught from Lake Gennesaret. The big man with the loud mouth became very quiet. He recognized the great fisherman on the shore, and he was so in awe that he dove out of the boat into the water and began to swim the 100 yards to the rocky beach. As far as we know, the burly fisherman Peter didn't say anything to the man on the shore when he arrived. For once in his life, he was speechless. The other 6 fishermen were rowing the boat. They were pulling the heavy net that was loaded to the brim with huge fish. The bearded campfire cook, noticing that Peter was looking at the fish smoldering over the open fire, probably realized that Peter was thinking of a different fire, the one around which he was standing a few nights before in Jerusalem when he had denied Jesus 3 times. Rather than allow Peter to dwell on the failure in his life, he just made a simple request of this burly fisherman: bring some of the fish that you've just caught. As if to pay penance for his sins of denial, Peter didn't just bring a few. He grabbed the entire net full of hundreds of pounds of flopping fish and drug the whole catch to Jesus. This action fits Peter's personality so well, doesn't it? I mean, it's all or nothing. Well, the bearded fisherman chef then invited the 7 fishermen to join him for breakfast. And he tore the bread into pieces and he passed it around to them, no doubt reminding them of the Last Supper that he had shared with them when he instituted the Lord's Supper the night before his crucifixion. He then dished out the fish that he had caught and prepared. It was a breakfast that these disciples would not soon forget. For with this breakfast, Jesus proved to them that he was the real deal, the same man that they had known before, who was doing the same things he had always done with them. But it was what Jesus did after breakfast that was most important for Peter. The Good Shepherd took his cast sheep into his arms and gently helped restore the blood flow as he spoke soothing words to him. He helped him get back on his feet. He took Peter on a long walk along the shore, and he asked him 3 times, "Peter, do you love me?" He used a Greek word for love that's a very strong and deep love, but Peter answered with a weaker form of the word love. In the Greek, he answers with a friendship level love. "Oh yes, Lord, I friendship love you." See, Peter didn't trust his own level of love anymore after his 3 denials of Jesus the night before the crucifixion. And Jesus didn't scold him for this. Rather, he breathed wind back into the sails of this man from the little village of Bethsaida. He offered him a new calling 3 times, one for each of the 3 denials. He said to Peter, "Feed my lambs, shepherd my sheep, and feed my sheep." He was telling Peter that he has faith in him, that he knows Peter's worthy of being a great leader, a teacher, an elder, a preacher, an apostle. He was restoring Peter's faith in himself. He ended by once again inviting Peter, "Follow me." And Peter's soul was restored after the most excruciating experience of his life. His spirit was rejuvenated. His spiritual compass was set back to true north again. And you know what? He never looked back. From that point on, he became a great leader in the church at Jerusalem and worldwide. He traveled and preached the gospel as far as Rome and in many other places. He wrote 2 very spiritually deep letters that are part of the Bible, 1 Peter and 2 Peter. And by the way, on my website, you can find a full 9-lesson class on the book of 1 Peter. And he ended up dying as a martyr on a cross. As a matter of fact, he requested to be crucified upside down so that he wouldn't be crucified like his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. He did this in complete commitment to the Good Shepherd. No more denials for Peter. He lived the rest of his life doing what Jesus asked him to do. He fed the lambs and he shepherded the flock of the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd can do the same for you. He can reach down and pick you up from your cast position. He can get your blood flowing again. He can help you with your legs to get them back underneath you. He can help you walk again, even run again. And He's calling you to follow Him. He has great things in store for you. He has a mission for your life, and He wants you to fulfill it, and He's willing to help you do it. It all starts with your decision to believe in the words of Psalm 23:3. He restores my soul. Say it with me. He restores my soul. One more time. He restores my soul. Now get up off the couch, get up out of that chair, and start living your life for the Good Shepherd. Go do something positive in His name today. Feed His lambs, shepherd His sheep. God bless you.